Okay, so the need for independent politics. So I'm going to read from the August Nimitz article again. I'll read it, it's in academic, somewhat academic language. Then I'll read it and translate it, my interpretation of it. So, first, August Nimitz sets the context for, I think, why we need independent politics and separate from the Democratic Party. First, he describes how, he says, capitalism has entered into one of those rare but consequential moments in its 250 plus year history, a prolonged period of contraction and or slow growth. It was only a matter of time before working class resistance would begin to build. And there's a crisis of the 1970s, there's a capitalist crisis. Wage rates have indeed been stagnant or declining since then, regardless of the party affiliation of the occupant in the White House. Social wages have also come under attack in order to restore capitalist profitability. Never should it be forgotten there was a Democratic Party President, William Jefferson Clinton, who eliminated a key plank of the New Deal, the concessions the ruling class was forced to grant to workers in the streets in response to the Great Depression. Aid to families of dependent children, AFDC, was intended to be the first sacrificial lamb to capital on the altar of the New Democrats that the Clintons so personified. Only out of fear for the political price to be paid have the governing servants of capital not gone after their real target, Social Security. And both parties want to get rid of this. So what he's kind of saying, capitalism has been in crisis. There was a boom starting in the late 40s, post-World War II boom, from roughly the late 40s to the earlier mid-1970s. Starting in the 1970s, there's a period of crisis of global capitalism. The details are really complicated. Basically, I think an overaccumulation of capital. Workers, standards of living of workers have declined dramatically since then. As everybody knows, the last 30, 40 years. And there was austerity, we call neoliberalism, and the Democrats were just as much a part of that. They're just as much a part of that as the Republicans. They're both cooperating together. And August Nimitz goes on to say, and Social Security was targeted. There's a huge, they still can't touch it. Both parties would like to privatize it, really would. They're privatizing, both parties are aggressively privatizing the public education system, and accelerated under Obama. So anyway, August Nimitz goes on to say that what many of us didn't anticipate about the crisis that began in 1974-75, particularly in the U.S. case, was the extent to which the capitalist state through the Fed would promote the use of credit to perpetuate the American dream for many workers, either through credit cards and or their houses as ATMs. This came to a virtual halt in 2008, except interestingly for student loans, with only a partial rebound since then. The expected resistance has so far mainly taken the electoral road, as the unprecedented 2016 election cycle revealed in both the Trump and Sanders phenomena, that both campaigns have an echo in many other advanced capitalist countries in Europe, for example, testifies to the systemic nature of the crisis. So basically saying capitalism is in crisis. Credit has been used to basically continue some level of prosperity. That kind of came to an end in 2008, and in a result of that crisis, mainstream politics is broken. People don't trust it, and there's a rise of mainly the populist right throughout the world. And he describes some of this. And August Nimitz goes on to say, but the ruling class did begin to pay a price for the beginning of the end of the American dream. Coupled with the two other blows suffered in the mid-70s, Watergate and the defeat in Vietnam, trust in government and the political class precipitously declined and has never recovered. A 2015 poll Nimitz cites anticipated Hillary Clinton's defeat, given how negatively the vast majority of the population viewed the political class in both Democratic and Republican clothing. And he goes on to say that, in jest, but only slightly, I tell colleagues whose specialty is Congress that they should receive extra hardship pay for having to study such an unpopular institution. And polls consistently show the Congress is very unpopular in the U.S. So a sliver of the 60% of the eligible electorate who voted, about 77,000 in 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, decided to risk Trump in the White House rather than Clinton, who epitomized all that was wrong with bourgeois politics. Had he been less outrageous, he would have won the popular as well as the Electoral College vote. And so I mentioned a friend of mine who drove through, who was at Standing Rock. She drove back through these Rust Belt towns, economically devastated. She called capitalist nihilism, and huge drug problems and just total despair. And when Trump said in a TV speech that he stood for change, he stood against the corruption of the status quo. My friend said, yeah, she knew he'd be elected. So there's a Rob Urey article, in the Counterpunch article, and Rob Urey goes on to say that, however, the other left, that part of the country that supports Donald Trump, includes them in the left, because they despise the manager class that spent the last 5 decades dispossessing them for the benefit of the oligarchs, doesn't get its news from NPR or the New York Times. Both of these sources heavily promoted both George W. Bush administration's weapons of mass destruction lies and charges of Russian interference in the 2016 election, was Russiagate, which turned out to be wholly fraudulent. And so the 3 states which basically threw the Electoral College for Donald Trump, had the 3 highest casualty rates in the Iraq War, and Hillary's reputation as a warmonger could have something to do with the fact that people just didn't, her base, her constituency didn't want to vote for her. Her super predator remark, which she said back in the 90s about crime, was regarded as a racist remark, and African Americans could have lost her votes in Michigan. So whatever one thinks of Donald Trump and impeachment, it is the political establishment that is trying to bring him down. It is the political establishment that is trying to bring him down. That the whistleblower is a CIA officer who has since returned to active duty at the agency isn't lost on Mr. Trump supporters, as much as the NPR tote bag set believes that is the fount of wisdom and truth. They, along with the CIA, inflicted 3 years of the cynical farce of Russiagate on us and came up empty-handed. The CIA, according to Rob Urey, was the central protagonist in Russiagate, the origins of the new Cold War found in Bill Clinton's first term, when administration neocons looted, plundered, and moved NATO against a prostrate Russia, in contradiction to guarantees not to. And recently, the lesser evil thinking that entices many well-intentioned liberals, workers as well, to keep electing Democrats, and thus the delay in the construction of a real working-class political alternative, would only, I further argued, embolden capital to do whatever is necessary to lower wage costs in order to restore profitability. A demagogue in the White House who plays a xenophobic card is one reason for Wall Street's embrace of Trump, the Trump trade, at least so far. Goes on to say that the lesser evil thinking that entices many well-intentioned liberals, workers as well, to keep electing Democrats, and thus the delay in the construction of a real working-class political alternative, would only, I further argue, embolden capital to do whatever is necessary to lower wage costs in order to restore profitability. A demagogue in the White House who plays a xenophobic card is one reason for Wall Street's embrace of Trump, the Trump trade, at least so far. Capital always profits from a divided working class. Lowering wage costs, both individual and social, is in fact the default position of capital since its inception, a Dickensian world. The irreconcilability of the fundamental class interest of capital and labor is the key in why a Bernie Sanders reform capitalism alternative won't work. Consider the jobs crisis, where fewer and fewer living wage jobs have led to all manner of tragic social, be it gangbanging in West Side Chicago or ODing on Oxycontin in a small town Ohio. Without work, the proletariat is the precariat. So why aren't capitalists spending the trillions they're sitting on to create, quote, decent paying jobs? Simply because it's not profitable. Or more accurately, it's not as profitable as investing in fictitious capital, as Marx called it, the credit default swaps and other sophisticated kinds of paper. It's no more mysterious than that. Not only is money making money more remunerative than money buying labor to make money, but it's less risky because all the stuff has to be sold to make a profit. Yet, as the 2008 crisis dramatically revealed, the money-making game entails its own unique risks. It works as long as most players think they can exit faster than others when the house of cards or better paper collapses. So, he goes into a Marxist analysis of financialization. It's overaccumulation of capital, so there's too much capital to compete against, so it's more profitable for investors to engage in financial investment rather than manufacturing or things like that. And so that's why money's not going into, quote, high-paying jobs. There's no real profitability for a decline in profitability. Corporate profitability has increased, but only at the rate of really bringing down the lower standard of living for the working class. So basically means that due to financialization, capitalism at this stage can't be reformed. There's been relentless pressure against working people. Capitalism's internal logic has brought it to a stage in its life history that obviates any prospect for returning to the good old days for workers. As the bosses in the carrier plant in Indianapolis cold-heartedly put it to the workers on the eve of the election, it's either $5.85 an hour or we move to Mexico. No wonder many a worker of different skin color, gender, and national origins in the plant voted for Trump, who promised to save their jobs. A drowning person, as Marx once put it, will grab hold of a twig in hope of salvation. But for Hillary Clinton's diehard apologists, those voters were the irredeemable basketful of deplorables responsible for her defeat. Rather than fault the system, capitalism, owing to the privileged bubble in which they reside, hope to blame its victims. A pattern the African American working class, especially after the 70s, has long been subjected to. And there are cases a few years ago of liberals cheering when people in West Virginia who voted for Trump lost their health care. They were cheering this on, like, hey, it serves them right, they voted for Trump. I mean, God, people live in a really narrow bubble. Now, so the psychology of Trump supporters, racism, plays a role, but I think, there's an element of Trump supporters who are racist. Yes, certainly, undeniably. But there's also a powerful need to say up yours to the elites. I think a lot of his base, apparently has a 40% approval rating, know Trump is a con man. They kind of realize it, but it's like they were treated with nihilism and disdain for decades. They're returning the favor. Okay, when Trump has a deranged tweet, when he says he's going to lock up Adam Schiff or Hillary Clinton or whatever, they love it. They love it. The system has nothing for them, and they know it. So that's what's going on. And August Nimitz goes on to say that the best that capitalism has to offer workers is behind us. So it's well known, and the recognition by the working class in its immense majority is the recognition by the working class that capitalism has nothing more to offer us is a necessary condition for a real working class alternative, the socialist revolution. So unless there's an alternative, as August Nimitz wrote, unless there's one thing is certain, I wrote in 2013, the logic of capital dictates that unless there's a real working class alternative, bourgeois politics will keep moving to the right, especially in the context of the still unfolding crisis. Every delay in the pursuit of independent working class political action only embodies reaction. Both the Democratic and Republican wings of the ruling class and their media were willing to risk a Bonapartist-inclined buffoon in the White House in order to prevent the victory of a pink socialist, and that speaks volumes. So attempts by the left to take over the Democratic Party have all failed. The Jesse Jackson campaign twice in the 1980s basically destroyed much of the left. from the 60s, the new communist movement, just destroyed it with nothing left to show for it. Cynthia McKinney, who was she was a Democratic Party five-term congressperson from Georgia. She went a little further than the Democratic Party wanted her to. She criticized support for Israel and a variety of other things, and the party politically destroyed her. In fact, her name became a verb to become Cynthia McKinney, and same is true as Dennis Kucinich. He was mixed. He actually explicitly said that he wanted to preserve the Democratic Party. He ran as a left. I believe he ran in 2004 and 2008. He was, or 2004. He was like a leftist candidate for president, and from Ohio, congressman from Ohio. He said some good stuff, but he wanted to bring people back into the Democratic Party. He explicitly said this to prevent the formation of alternate politics, and he played a role. He again was destroyed. They redistricted him out of his. So, and he was destroyed. Bernie Sanders and AOC. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, congressperson from New York City. She got a lot of buzz. She won kind of a fluke election. She's kind of connected with the DSA, although it's unclear what her role in the DSA is. She's in the Democratic Party, and she's under party discipline and accountable to the Democratic Party, not the DSA. And very quickly, she's given out signals that she's willing to play ball. She voted for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House. She voted for funding for ISIS, at least the first time. Second time, she did vote against it. There was a huge pushback. And so she's shown she can play ball. She's not going to be a Cynthia McKinney. Also, there's a Malcolm X grassroots movement. Kelly Akuno, who's an African-American activist, and he was an intellectual leader of the Malcolm X grassroots movement, a movement for a type of municipal socialism in Jackson, Mississippi. They elected a mayor, Chokwe Lumumba. He died. His son took over, and he has an article entitled "Democratic Party Affiliation in Mississippi: A Compromise Made in Error." He notices that they used the movement ran as Democrats. They used the ballot line, and it's not just an empty ballot line. Leftists running as Democrats, they pay a cost. As a result, the result of that, he couldn't criticize other Democrats. Okay, this is part of the deal, and here's part of a deal. But they want to work through the Democratic Party. The Malcolm X grassroots movement built its own independent political organization to fight for the kind of thoroughgoing social and economic change to outline what became the Jackson-Kush plan. And if that didn't work, maybe they thought about building an independent party, but neither were much tried. Effectively, the Malcolm X grassroots crew simply suspended their own views to enlist as Democrats. They did this so successfully that after running 4 local campaigns in 10 years, a great deal of Black Jackson, which voted for its candidates, didn't know about Jackson-Kush or the principles the Malcolm X grassroots movement stands for. In Akuno's book, he said that's not a victory, and said they both advised Chokwe Antar, Chokwe Lumumba's son, not to run for mayor, this time for similar reasons. When Chokwe Lumumba ran for mayor in 2012, the city of Jackson had a budget surplus. Now, the new mayor is confronted with what Akuno called the kind of Syriza trap. That is they ran as Democrats, they became embedded in the Democratic Party. They couldn't criticize other Democrats, so they got into a situation where, like, the Syriza trap was a leftist party which was elected in Greece. Greece, for years, has been pummeled by the IMF and the European Union. They got these fraudulent loans back in the 90s, which dramatically accelerated. The people didn't democratically vote to support the loans. The people were really pummeled by it, and basically the European Union and the institutions and the IMF are destroying the country. So this radical leftist party took power, Syriza. They had roots in the Greek communist movement going back decades. Okay, they decided not to leave the European Union, basically, even though there was a referendum for it. Would have been difficult leaving, but it would have been more difficult staying. They could have built an alternative. They could have confiscated their own oligarchy. They could have, but they decided not to do it, work within the European Union. And so they were caught in a situation of having to administer austerity, which is kind of the same on a much smaller basis. The Malcolm X grassroots movement confronted the Jackson Kush program confronted in Mississippi. And the central business district of Jackson is under state control, has confronted with the privatization of its schools and water. The razing of several black neighborhoods are imminent, and there's an emergency management regime coming to strip elected city government of the ability to do much of anything without approval from bankers. The Lumumba administration is already working with advisors from the Gates Foundation, probably trying to find its own emergency own emergency managers before these are picked by someone else. So governing in 2017 means having to manage capitalism's crisis without questioning capitalism. It means being the black faces who administer the cuts on austerity and gentrification. It means giving up the rights to criticize other Democrats who take orders from the contributors and investors, and giving up the rights to oppose the permanent wars too. This isn't what most of us signed up for. So again, as far as electoral campaigns about AOC or Bernie Sanders or others, there's a difference between a political campaign and a movement. First, a political campaign is not a social movement. It just exists solely to get one person elected, and everything will be okay once one person is elected. And it doesn't leave permanent structures. Especially Sanders' campaign in 2016 has not left permanent structures. It left Our Revolution, which campaigns for centrist Democrats. And Sanders supporters don't really think beyond Sanders. Like, okay, what happens? I think it's unlikely he's going to win. Very unlikely he'll be president. And what happens then? What's the game plan for a reform? What's the game plan after that? Just everybody goes back home, and we have nothing to show for it. I feel it's unlikely, but if he does become president, it could be a disaster for the left. He won't be able to enact anything he says some good things: Medicare for all, free college education. Sure, he says great stuff. Not so much foreign policy, but domestic policy. He says great stuff. But this would take a gargantuan mass movement, and he's done nothing to build it. He's done nothing to build a mass movement his entire political career. He said recently, or about a year ago, we need a mass movement. But what has he done to build it? Seriously. He spurned any independent politics. His entire career is based on electoralism. He actually called the cops twice on anti-war movements, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So he's essentially a sheepdog for the Democratic Party. He's not at heart really criticizing them. So, okay, there's a really great thing that went around social media. I'm going to just read this off, and I think it's really worthwhile. And some of the dark side of Bernie Sanders that most people don't really know about. So, you still believe Bernie Sanders is an anti-establishment, anti-war politician? So this can be well documented. First, Sanders voted in favor of the use of force, euphemism for bombing, in 12 sovereign countries that never represented a threat to the U.S. Yeah, he voted for the Afghanistan war. So he voted for bombing Afghanistan, Lebanon, Libya, Palestine, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Yugoslavia, Haiti, Liberia, Zaire, and Sudan. Bernie Sanders has accepted campaign money from defense contractor Raytheon, which is a pretty horrible company. He continues his undying support for the $1.5 trillion F-35 industry. Basically, it's an industry. It's a horrifically expensive fighter plane. And said that Predator drones have done some very good things. He said this. Sanders has always voted in favor of awarding more corporate welfare for the military-industrial complex. And even if he says he's against a particular war, he ends up voting in favor of funding it. He's voted to fund every war. He voted against the Iraq war, but he voted for funding it. Sanders routinely backs appropriations for imperial wars, the corporate scan of Obamacare, wholesale surveillance, and bloated defense budgets. He loves to bluster about corporate welfare and big banks, but he voted for funding the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which deregulated commercial banks and created an unregulated market in derivatives and swaps, which was the major contributor to the 2001 economic crisis. Number 4. Regardless of calling himself an independent, Sanders is a member of the Democratic caucus and votes 98% of the time with the Democrats and votes in the exact same way as war criminal Hillary Clinton 93% of the time. Sanders campaigned for Bill Clinton in the 1992 presidential race and again in 96. This is after Clinton had rammed through NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and vastly expanded the policy system of mass incarceration, destroyed welfare, which I talked about. And the sheepdog is a card the Democratic Party plays. Number 5, the sheepdog is a card the Democratic Party plays when there's no White House Democrat running for re-election. The sheepdog is a presidential candidate running ostensibly to the left of the establishment Democrats, to whom the billionaires will award the nomination. Sheepdogs are herders, charged with herding activists and voters back into the Democratic fold who might otherwise drift leftward and outside of the Democratic Party, or staying home. In 2004, Sanders called on Ralph Nader to abandon his presidential campaign. The Democratic Party has played the sheepdog card at least 7 to 8 times in the past, utilizing collaborators such as Eugene McCarthy in 1968, Jesse Jackson in 1984 and 88, Jerry Brown in 92, Al Sharpton in 2000, Howard Dean in 2004, Dennis Kucinich in 2008, and in 2016 was Bernie Sanders' turn. Regardless of calling himself a, quote, socialist, Bernie Sanders called the late Hugo Chavez, architect of the Bolivian Revolution in Venezuela, responsible for lifting millions of lives out of poverty, a, quote, dead communist dictator. Then he saddled up for a photo op with Evo Morales at the Vatican, and also voted to extradite former Black Panther member Assata Shakur. Sanders refers to ISIS's godfather and warmonger extraordinaire, John McCain, as my friend and a very decent person. McCain was a horrible guy. Number 8. Sanders routinely parrots the DNC lines. The Russians hacked our elections, despite the fact that there's no evidence of such hacking, but lowered his head and tucked tail when the DNC actually rigged the primary elections against him, proving he is more loyal to the Democratic Party than to the millions of people who supported him and donated to his fraudulent campaign. Yeah, in 2016, he didn't want to win. There's just strong evidence he didn't intend to win. Number 9, Bernie Sanders expressed staunch support for the aid of violently right-wing separatist forces, such as the self-styled Kosovo Liberation Army, whose members were trained as mujahideen during Bill Clinton's 100-day bombing of Yugoslavia and Kosovo in 1999, which I've talked about. He has an extensive record of supporting jihadist proxies for the overthrow of sovereign governments in Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, and Libya. Number 10, Bernie Sanders supported Bill Clinton's sanctions against Iraq, sanctions that prohibited medicines for infants and children, and a huge number of innocents died for no other reason than they were Iraqi. Number 11, Bernie Sanders said yes in a voice vote to the Clinton-era crime bill, which I talked about in 1994, which expanded the death penalty to cover 60 offenses. So it looks like Sanders is obviously pro-death penalty. In the 2016 elections, Sanders betrayed millions of people that believed in him when, after making the central point of his campaign the fight against Wall Street, he instructed his followers to vote for Wall Street's candidate, war criminal, corporate criminal Hillary Clinton. So you cannot be committed to fighting Wall Street and then abruptly endorse the Wall Street candidate. If you were to do this with a car transmission, you'd strip your gears. This is why it baffles me when people speak of him in tones of reverence and awe. That's by Walter Hartman. It was circulating on social media. So I hope you found this interesting and useful. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel.